Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to ask you a question, and I want to talk to you about the question. How safe are we, truly? I would like to point out, while you contemplate the answer to this question, that the city of Trenton has seen more murders this year than it has ever seen in its entire history. And it was 32 murders, and the year isn't even over yet. We're only 9 months into the year. And we have reason to believe that we might see more murders. So let's point out the fact then that the capital city of the state of New Jersey has seen more murders than it has ever seen. This gives me reason to declare that we are less safe than we have ever been. And that warrants serious discussion about the qualifications of our political representatives and how our laws are being enforced, and what we can do to improve both the laws that are being passed and how the laws are being enforced. But I believe that before we have that discussion, we need to talk a little bit more about what safety is. And we need to reiterate the fact that the top priority of government, the function of government, is to protect the citizens and ensure that they are safe. But what does it mean to be safe? Is it just a matter of there are homicides in this town, but not in that town, so the town with less homicides is more safe? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. There are several issues that I believe pertain to the concept of safety. And so let's talk a little bit about what safety is in general. There is, I believe, a profound difference between safety and what often is said to be safety, which is control, with the interest or the belief that it causes people to be safe. So let me proceed then, if you would be so kind. There is then first the issue of general freedom. And what do I mean by general freedom? Well, first of all, I mean this idea that you can say the things that you believe, the religious things, the political things, the economic things. You can be who you are. You can do, in general, what you want, so long as you are not hurting other people. That's what safety is in the most general sense. But there are other considerations in terms of what safety means as well. For example, the right to property. The right to property is a major safety concern, because if you don't have the right to own your own property, or if you don't have the right to own most of your own property, you cannot properly take care of yourself and provide for yourself. And this is a concern with high taxes. If, for example, you're taxed over half of your income, which is the way things are done in certain European nations, one has to wonder if you are truly safe. I would say absolutely no, you're not, nor is the general economy. And then there's the issue of education. Now, why is education a safety issue? Well, that's because you have young people who they have to, if you are to live in a society that constantly improves and advances, or even maintains its present standards, at the very least, those present standards would have to be taught, and as so would, the facts of reality, history, necessities like math and English. These things are absolutely essential. If we lived in a society of idiots, the society would collapse. Therefore, education is absolutely essential to public safety. That's why I believe in public education. We have to ask ourselves, is our public education decent? Is it sufficient? Is it the best it can be? And why or why not? Another issue is healthcare. I mean, this is a pretty obvious one. Healthcare is important because if your healthcare is not good, you could die or suffer terribly. And so we have to ask ourselves, what makes us safe in terms of healthcare? And my belief, just in terms of principle and fundamentals, is that if somebody cannot afford emergency healthcare, we ought to provide that for them. And but if that person could afford it, but didn't take responsibility in their spending, I don't believe then that person should have healthcare that is essentially subsidized. I think that's unfair, and I think that person was abusive and would have to pay the consequences. But I want to talk briefly about why I think that if you can't afford healthcare, it should be provided for you. Because some people would say this is not a... Some people would say that that's an attack on the individual liberty of members of society, and that it's certainly not a libertarian concept. I think that it is a libertarian concept, and I will tell you why. If we lived in a country where a significant number of people were sick and could not afford to take care of themselves, I think we would see a society in which there was a lot of anger, and a society where there's a lack of profound compassion, and there's a society where we're looking at our fellow citizens and we're saying, to hell with you. And to me, that's wrong. To me, that is a disrespect for human life. Now, the exact and specific details as to what dictates, well, this person clearly and absolutely couldn't afford emergency healthcare services and ought to be helped, but this person could, but put him or herself in a situation where they don't have the means, to me is it's complicated in that the legal language is something that requires a lot of time and concentration. But when we look at a situation like Obamacare doesn't solve the problem. I think Obamacare is terribly unfair and inefficient. And the reason that I think Obamacare is unfair is because it just taxes people a lot. And high taxes has never caused an economy to thrive. High taxes will not enable people to have incredible health care. It may provide a certain chunk of society to have mediocre health care, but mediocre health care should never be the goal. The health care goal should be to ensure that the needy, the truly needy, can be treated in the case of an emergency, but that everybody else has the means to afford their own private, personally, uniquely catered and devised healthcare plans. That's the goal. And then there's the issue, in my opinion, when we're talking about protection of fairness. And this means, to me, equality under the law. And we do live, unfortunately, in a state and in a country where we don't see complete equality under the law. And sadly, it is those who often claim that they feel unequal under the law who are seeking inequality under the law and are asking for special privileges, whether it is because of their race, because of their gender, because of their sexual orientation, because of their whatever industry they belong to, or whatever special function within an industry they belong to. And I spoke to you about this in a previous video address. But the problem, the ultimate problem with inequality under the law is that it stirs up resentment and has one group saying, that's not fair. This group has something I don't have, or this group is being considered, but I'm not being considered. Again, from the government, or by the government. It's one thing to talk about being considered by government, and another thing to be having a discussion about being considered by the society in general, which is a complex cultural, economic discussion that will only thrive if we're free to openly make our own decisions and judgments about that. So those are my views in terms of what is safety. And a further comment specifically in regard to equality under the law and the importance of equality under the law. Let's point out that some of the most horrific events, the most tragic events in human history existed specifically on the principle of inequality under the law. And while at first, when the inequality under the law principle, or the law that was based on that principle, existed in a mild way, it grew. And I often like to talk about Nazi Germany and what happened there because it is just a textbook example of how tyranny develops. Keep in mind that at first in Germany, when Hitler was officially the dictator, and by the way, he was a democratically elected dictator in a government that was fascist, and by fascist I mean a government that pretended to have a free market, but really had a market that was, that had the government decide who was upper class, who was middle class, and who was lower class, and how they would all run their businesses. Just putting that out there. But let's get back to the issue of how Nazi Germany grew from milder laws of different groups being unequal under the law, and then culminated in mass genocide. So, in the beginning, it was just a matter of the Jews are the cause of our economic woes. So, we're going to put stars, we're going to force them to wear stars, and we're going to say it's okay. Not only is it okay to destroy their property and, break their stores, break the glass. For example, Kristallnacht, right? The Night of Broken Glass, when Germans raided Jewish property. And it ranged from graffiti to absolute destruction and theft. This was essentially the government saying, this group is the problem, and it's okay to identify that this group is the problem. That then led to the group, the scapegoat group, being forcibly removed from their homes and thrown into ghettos. That then transpired into being forced into concentration camps and genocide, mass genocide. Over 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. But I want to get back to this idea of, again, being unequal under the law, and even the concept of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, this idea that I will even go before Kristallnacht and say, this group is to blame for our economic problems, or even to say, this group is to blame for this group is to blame for problems that exist within our society. Now let's look at, for example, the United States of America and New Jersey in terms of specific state policies and laws that put blame on particular groups. And they do. What groups are blamed? Well, without a doubt, nationally, rich people are blamed for the problems that the United States of America are suffering from. And it's interesting, if you note the rhetoric